right, hello and welcome to another Expert Inside interview. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP, online sales magazine and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Bill Wilson, who's up in Nova Scotia, Canada, in I think even more sunny conditions than I am.
Hi, how are you? It's
Good,
great to be
good.
here.
And Bill is the founder and CEO of Pace Pricing, a pricing consulting and coaching firm specializing in working with B2B SaaS companies. As a three-time founder, you've been through the ups and downs faced by consulting agency and SaaS companies. And now you help with pricing model structures and tactics. And one of the things that we want to talk about today is how to correctly monetize the value of your product. So, Bill, to get started, for those watching or listening, just define what you mean by monetizing the value of your product.
Yeah, sure. Well, we often think about price as a number,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a fine idea. And it works really well for consumer packaged goods and everything we buy in the store, like this can of pop or something.
Yeah.
But when we're thinking about tools that people are going to be using every single day, it's really about what they're trying to achieve with those tools. So when I think about the value, I'm trying to figure out, how do we enrich the lives of those people? And I know that might sound a little far-fetched when we're talking about software, but it is true, right? So we're trying to take someone from point A to point B.
Yep.
We're trying to make progress against a job. And so where do we fit inside that? And then what value do we add to them getting that done? And then our job as, SaaS companies is we create value in the world, and then we need to capture that value. And we capture that value through packaging and pricing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of our job, right? That's our only job. Create value, capture value, create value, capture value.
But let's be honest, Bill. I mean, you know this better than I, but let's be honest. Like most companies, say a company starts up in a particular space, first thing they do is they look at the competitors and they say, okay, those ones at the high end, they're expensive ones, and then they look at the low end ones, and then often they say, oh, let's just price ourselves somewhere in between, or if we're going to compete down the low end, let's just price it. So they just comparative price and then try to tweak a little bit on the margins.
Yeah. I mean, especially as companies first launch, there are some things you need to start well with, and pricing is one of those things in the early days you can iterate on, but there are some things you can do early on to get a good head start. And one is picking the right value metric. So just like people copy prices, they also copy other people's value metrics. So for example, if your software sells per seat, or if your competitors all sell per seat, then maybe you're going to sell per seat. It may or may not be the right choice. It may be market aligned, but the markets are always shifting and changing. We're seeing that a lot now, especially with the onslaught of AI. So I think in the very early days, if you have one package, for example, and you're very, very early and you can get the right value metric, you're kind of 80% of the way there.
Right.
Then the right way to look at competitors' pricing. So I do not like copying competitors' pricing. And there's a few reasons for that. The first one is that you assume they got it right. Right? That's the first one. You assume, and you don't know what their strategy is. You don't necessarily know how they're backed. You don't know what's going on in their boardroom. You don't know what their strategy overall is. And you just assume they have it correct. And they are just like you. And they're also looking at the market and copying everybody else. So it's just a big circle. And so that's the first reason. The second reason is that you offer something unique in the market. Otherwise, you probably would not have built the product. If you built the product to copy another product, you should probably just stop. Right? You thought to yourself, I can do this better. And if you can do it better, then what is it you're doing better? And then you need to capture that value, right? And so that's another reason why not to copy competitors' pricing. But here's how you can use competitors' pricing. There's two ways that I like to look at competitors' pricing. The first way is to look at the competitive, like what is the next best competitive alternative? And this is a common approach in what we call enterprise value to the customer, or enterprise, value exchange, any of those kinds of things. But it's like, what's the next best competitive alternative? And that's our starting price. And then we just need to measure how much better or worse we are at certain levers. And we can measure that either through monetary means, like saving time. Okay, let's top down that and figure out, oh, we're saving this much time, all those kinds of things. And you can start to get an actual monetary number that you can add to that next best competitive alternative. And so that's a safe way to start looking at competitors' pricing, but still taking into account your unique value and what you add over and above. And the important thing to note is that it's not necessarily just what you add, it's also what you don't do. Maybe they
Right.
do something a lot better than you.
Mhm.
That detracts, that takes value away. It reminds me of the Third Rock from the Sun episode with John Lithgow trying to understand tipping. You know, every time you please me, I will add money. Every time you displease me, I'll take money away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's that kind of give and take. And so, yeah, so that's why. So that's one way, and then the other way is a bit more. Um, a little less grounded in the actual monetary pieces, but more about using the competitors' pricing as a baseline and looking at the value drivers, like the things that actually, hey, we're a lot better at getting people
Mm,
to the result. I
right.
can't necessarily articulate that terms in monetarily, but we are better than the competition, and you can do that in like a simple Likert scale, like 1 to 5, so that you kind
Mhm.
of, and you sort of just rank yourself on 3 or 4 of these things, and you can do some quick math and just sort of give yourself a range.
Right.
On those things. So that's 2 safe ways to look at competitive pricing.
Yeah,
Um,
and
as
in
you
or
start.
and yeah, and in order to do that, that way, in order to do that, you have to be really honest, right? I mean, you have to be able to look at your own product or service and say, yes, it really is better in these ways, and maybe, yeah, it's not in these ways. So, how do I balance it out? Who is my target here? Maybe my target is the mid market or the lower mid market because I do these things better, but I don't do all of these things, and there's a value to that down here. But it does require, because sometimes, let's face it, we have rose tinted glasses, don't we? We just think our product is fantastic and therefore we should be able to charge a premium.
Yeah, I think there's two that happen. One is teams, think they're absolutely the best at everything, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, if you're still like you founder led, like, that's not the case usually. Like the
Yeah,
founders are
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
they're pretty real. But they're so used to saying it in their pitch decks, that
Hmm.
they're the absolute best, that competitive slide where they're always up in the
Yeah.
top right. Um, and then the other thing happens too is where they've been around for a little while and they're in a really red ocean and they're just like, we're just the same as everybody else, we're just the
Hmm.
same. And those are the two extremes that I see. Very rarely do I see people say that they're worse than the competition, and I challenge them on those. I challenge them all the time. I'm like, okay, so I mean, looking at XYZ competitor that's been around forever, they're the incumbent, everybody loves them, you guys started 9 months ago, and
Hmm.
you're telling me that this really super important thing, you are 100% better than they are at it. And I'm just like, okay, cool. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Just a gut check. But yeah, like I think that is it. And you do have to be really honest. The one way you can get really honest with it though is talk to your early customers.
Right.
They have all the answers. They really do, and they want you to win. The reason they want you to win is because they already bought from you, and they want to know that they made a good choice. So they have a bit of, we often think we're scared of our customers sometimes when we talk about pricing. I love talking to my customers about pricing. I think it's one of the best things because they already bought from you. They already saw the value,
Yeah.
and it's a chance for you to confirm that value and to resell every time. Like every month we have an opportunity to resell our customer in SaaS. And
Hmm.
so we really need to talk to them about how they're getting value, what they really love, what's better, what's different, all of those things, because it will surprise you, especially in the early days. A lot
Yeah.
of customers will use your product in ways you don't expect and get value in ways you don't expect.
Yeah, and I think that's such a critical point to make, because I think it's anybody who hasn't brought a product or service to market, a product particularly, may not understand that. But you can build a product and you can build it for specific use cases and to solve specific problems. But the minute you put it out to market, how the customers use it can often really surprise you. And as you said, you can either suddenly discover there's additional value that you never even saw in the way they use it, or it can be the opposite, but hopefully it's not. But
Mhm.
it is such an important point, and that's why I think it's really important to talk to your early customers, because like you said, I mean, you could learn so much and you might actually be underpricing yourself.
I mean, yes, and that is so true. I remember when I took my product to market, Sales Right, it was the same kind of thing. We had built this beautiful quoting tool for B2B SaaS companies,
Mhm.
and it allowed you to configure. It's like a CPQ, but really pretty,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it allowed you to sign contracts and close deals and connect with your CRM and all that kind of stuff. And I said beautiful and pretty twice, and that's what people really loved, is
Mm,
that they would use it on demo calls to really show off the pricing and show it to customers, but rarely were they using it to close. So
right.
here I am really focusing on the close and trying to get that contract closed. And what they were really focused on was like, can you make this even look better?
Right.
Because this is a beautiful tool for us to present pricing to our customers. It's interactive. It's great. We love it. And so very different. things that I was trying to head for and what they were trying to head for. And so that's
Mhm.
a very early sign that you don't have product market fit, obviously.
Right.
But
But
it was a
but
really
you
it was a
do
really
but you
helpful
do
sign.
have a market.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a really helpful sign. It helped us reposition. We followed April Dunford's book, her obviously awesome book, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. I actually even gave her a call and said, "Hey, would you help us with this?" And she said, "You're too early, but here's what you should do." And we followed her process, and then gave her a quick call back, and she reviewed it with us, which was really nice of her. And yeah, we changed the positioning of the company, and then yeah, very shortly thereafter, we were acquired. So it was really fun.
Yeah. And talk to me a little bit too about, as you said, I mean, you can iterate pricing, as you go, as you learn more and everything, but obviously there's a limit to how often and how much you can iterate. And you do sometimes see, you see companies starting out really high and then they're going low and then they're coming back to the middle, and it all gets very confusing, especially to the end user, the purchaser.
Yeah, I think there's some. Yeah, I think there's a good cadence to changes.
Hmm.
Once you're fairly established, I think changing your pricing at least a couple times a year is probably reasonable. And a pricing change doesn't necessarily mean you're increasing the price. It could
Hmm.
mean you're changing something in a package. You're moving entitlements around. You're tweaking things or experimenting. And I think you need to be doing that kind of all the time, but
Hmm.
at least every 6 months. And then big changes, at least every couple of years, there's probably going to be some big change that you have to make, where it's going to be about moving your customers forward. And one of the, I think where it can get confusing is where you get some whiplash, where they do sort of make really quick changes. I don't know all the details about this, but I know Cursor just made some changes that really irritated the market. And Canva did something similar earlier this year. Even though I was a fan of their change, they
Hmm.
still really got a lot of backlash from it, and so they went backwards.
That's
So
right.
there's a lot of things you can do, but pricing is never perfect. It is only optimal for the time,
Hmm.
and so every feature you add changes your monetization, and if it doesn't, it should.
And there's always there's always pressure to lower prices, right? I mean, you'll always have customer or prospects who will always try. Talk to you a little bit about that, about holding the line on your value versus price.
Yeah, I think there's heroic efforts to get deals across the line all the
Yeah.
time, right? And um, you know, it's going to happen, especially in mid-market and enterprise sales. There's always going to be some level of expectation of discounting and all those types of things. The most important thing we can do is set really great guidelines for that. And so I think always having a discounting policy with a deal desk of some time in place is probably the right thing to do.
Hmm.
If you have a sales team of more than one person, then put a deal desk in place, because it's going to happen. Whatever leeway you give them, they will take. And I don't mean that negatively. I mean their job is to sell
Sure.
and to get the deal done. And so whatever things are at their disposal, they'll use. Um, and I think that's great. But having good guidelines is the first step. The second step is to know what to discount and what not to discount.
Hmm.
And so, if you think of like maybe there's like four components of your offer. If you're mid-market enterprise, you got like maybe an implementation fee, you've got
Yep.
your platform fee, you've got some add-ons, and you probably have one or two value metrics that are scaling with the product as the usage goes up. So the first thing I'm going to discount is probably going to be the implementation
Yeah.
fees, even though there's services tied to it. It's a good customer acquisition cost recovery mechanism,
Hmm.
but generally you can cut there. The next would be the platform fee, because it is the simple, straight, recurring piece that
Yep.
is not expanding over time. Add-ons would be next, and then the last thing you should discount, and maybe never discount, is the actual value metric, the thing that increases with value over time. With the exception of what I call strategic discounts. And that's not discounts to close a deal, but that's discounts to recognize volume. And
Right.
volume is, baked in. And so
Mhm.
a couple different ways to do those, but like that's sort of the order of operations I take when I'm thinking about what to discount and when.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm not sure if that is what you were getting at, but
Yeah,
that's how
no,
I.
absolutely, absolutely. And then just on over time, you have to obviously continue to deliver the value. The perception of value changes over time,
Mhm.
especially as people maybe get used to probably other products come out, other features. You have to balance that all the time and make sure that your product is continuing to deliver the value at the level of your pricing.
Absolutely. And um, I have a saying, product is pricing and pricing is product.
Hmm.
Right? The two things can never be split. And then the third piece that can never be split is positioning. So
Yeah.
those three things go together and can never, one always impacts the other. And so what I see a lot of times is that there will be lots of things being added to products and things. And then towards the end of that product cycle, they'll be saying, cool, how are we going to price this? Or where does this fit? Or, they're asking that question there. So I think one of the ways we can keep up with this is by asking that question as early as possible. So whatever your product management process is, you need to be asking yourself as you consider a feature, not to mention, do customers want it? Do they get value? All that kind of stuff. It's like, how are we going to monetize it?
Right.
And that doesn't mean necessarily charge for it. It could be a retention play, and therefore
Yeah.
it fits into a middle tier package to hold on to people. Notion just did this with their expansion play around adding mail and calendar. Right, those things are offered for free, and then the base package is about retention and expanding the footprint of the job to be done. And so there's lots of different ways, but they consider those things, and you need to consider them up front. So retention, expansion, acquisition. That's the first three lenses you look at. Right.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's like, well, where does it fit? Are we going to charge for it as an add-on? Where is it going to live? And just make your just go through a basic process. I've got an actual template for this if people want it, but um, it's just something that it's a thought exercise, right? It's not necessarily going to guerrilla your current product management process, but it's designed to make you think about monetization early. And I think
Mhm.
that's the most important part is just think about monetization early. What does it mean for the product? And then how do you get in? And that will allow you to keep up with what's happening in the market,
Yeah.
because
And
combine that with talking to your customers and you've got a pretty great loop.
yeah, and I just want to underline that point you made because I think it's a really important one that as you add features or additional components to your product, that may not be a time to charge for them. It may not be a time to increase prices. You may be using them to actually hold on to the pricing that you already have.
Yeah, absolutely. Retention it's one of the biggest things that pricing and packaging can
Mhm.
impact, and expansion, of course, as well. Acquisition a little harder, but still
Mhm.
still there. But those are the two big levers, and so I think people should be always looking at those because there's only a couple of moats, right?
Right.
Customer acquisition cost as low as possible,
Mhm.
right?
Abs-
Delivery of the service as low as
As low
possible.
as possible.
Those are the two things that you can really control. And the third thing is trust. And this is
Mhm.
often overlooked many, many times, is like building trust with your customers, which means fair, predictable pricing, um, is actually a big moat. People will stay for it, which is
Yeah.
counterintuitive, but they will.
Yeah, and no, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that's another important point for people to take away is the predictability piece. I mean, you can destroy customer trust in that in an instant by a sudden price change that either you didn't warn them properly about, you can't really you haven't got a good justification for. We hate pricing surprises, right? We don't like to get a sudden price increase, or we don't like in our personal lives we don't like suddenly our insurance company to say, hey, your premium's going up by X amount. I mean, we normally have visceral reactions to it, and therefore managing that process and holding that trust is so incredibly important.
Yeah. And I think, communicate early, communicate often is the
Hmm.
thing I say about price change. Be open and transparent about it. What's changing, why it's changing, how much value you're adding to their life, all of those things. No one likes a price increase,
Yeah,
period.
absolutely.
Right?
and
No
and
one likes it, but they
yeah,
will accept it.
yeah.
And that's the difference.
Yeah,
It's
and
about
like you said, if you have built that trust and you're delivering that value, and I think one of the things, and is in a lot of SaaS companies today is because they don't communicate very well, because they don't build good relationships with their customers, it's very easy to switch for a few dollars. I mean,
yeah.
there's not that loyalty. If you say, they're all the same anyway, they're all commoditized now. I can switch over. Oh, look at this product has this new feature and it's $2 more. I'll switch over there. I mean, if you haven't built that stickiness, it's very difficult to hold on to people.
Yeah, and I mean stickiness shows up in lots of different ways. And
Hmm.
in mid market, it's about what's the switching cost.
Yeah,
But sometimes the switching cost, like trust, can erode that. Can make
yeah,
a big switching cost seem fair,
yeah.
right? I know a company that switched billing providers because they, after 4 or 5 years with them, a subscription billing provider, they went and looked at what they were paying, and it was like, I don't know, $250,000 or something a year to them. And then they just went to market just to see, and it was a quarter of the price. Everybody was just a quarter of the
Right.
price, even at the volume they were doing. And they were like, what happened here? And it turns out they were on some legacy plan back when they priced really, really high, and they never moved everybody over to new pricing, and they just gouged them for like 3 years. They were like, screw it, we're out.
Yeah.
Even though it was like a massive overhaul, it was almost, I don't want to say it was spite,
Yeah.
but it felt a little like, they were very hurt, I think, or they felt like their trust was broken there and they couldn't get any satisfaction from the company. So they were just like, okay, cool, we're going to go somewhere else. And that's an interesting game because there's lots of competitors there, especially for SaaS companies. So,
Yeah.
but the switching cost is high.
Yeah.
And
And I
so,
think that raises a good point too. I think is, not to be obsessed with the pricing of competitors or whatever, but you do need to keep up you need to keep up with what's happening in your market to make sure that you don't end up like that outlier.
yeah, you need to know what's happening in the market. Like that's the number one thing, that watch competitors, see what they're doing. But like, there's what we call implicit collusion, right?
Mhm.
And it's essentially like, you see this, people will lower their prices and you're like, okay, cool, we'll lower our prices.
Mhm.
That's implicit collusion, right? Like we're
Sure.
colluding on price in the market. And I know it's big words, but it is kind of what it is. But like, just don't fall for it, right?
Mhm.
Like just don't fall for it if you know your value. But I mean, if the whole market is shifting, then you need to hold a position.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the two best positions you can possibly hold in any market are the premium brand and the budget brand.
Right.
Right? Everything else in the middle is kind of crappy because there's justification that has to happen in there. It's tough. But if you're the premium and you're like, nope, we are the Mercedes or the Rolls Royce of
Right.
XYZ, then that's what we are. Or we pitch ourselves as the budget, best bang for the buck. We are the bare bones version of this. If you just need these things, we are your team. Like there's very clear positioning there.
Mhm.
The rest of the stuff is tough in the
Yeah.
middle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, if you think of it, like it's like the car market, isn't it? Like, you've
Yeah.
got the budget cars, and you got the luxury brands, and then the ones in the middle, people aren't not really
Yeah,
sure.
just test driving 5 or 6 vehicles,
Yeah, yeah,
constantly.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Whereas like if I know I need a, reliable, inexpensive vehicle, you're probably gonna go and get a Hyundai or
Mhm.
something along those lines, or maybe
Yeah.
even a Kia. I don't know. But if you want like the premium brand, you're probably gonna go get yourself a Mercedes or a BMW or some Audi or something like that. And you
Yeah.
just, that's pretty easy to pick at that level. It's kind of more brand loyalty than anything.
Mhm. And if
So
you're in the
yeah,
middle, if you're in the middle, you're just gonna probably buy whichever one has a feature you like.
yeah, whoever has the best, lowest interest rate at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
The best incentives, the best deals. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
For
listen,
sure.
thanks, Bill. This has been fascinating. All of Bill's information will be below this video, but before you go, please do remind people about what you do.
Yeah, sure. We are a pricing consultancy that helps B2B SaaS firms use data to figure out how their packaging and pricing should work in market, so that they can grow in a scalable way and not hit their growth ceiling.
Excellent. Well,
So
listen, thanks again, Bill. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you all again very soon. Thank you.